We are going to begin lesson number 5, okay? I've had some new books printed for lessons starting at lesson 11 through 20, and they're going to be larger, okay? They're going to be I know some of you are like trying to see the writing on these, but we're going to hopefully make the switch to the larger ones, if that's possible. And anyway, it'll help you a little bit. These next 4 lessons probably will go by fairly quickly, okay? So anyway, let's begin. Lesson number 5. The glorious church is a what? A flock. That's right. I like this lesson. I always like the sort of the storyline or the relationship of the shepherd and the sheep. It's something that is always interesting to me. So I hope that helps. And the Bible talks about the church being like a flock. All right. There was one man, he said, I don't suffer from insanity because I enjoy every minute of it. Well, some people are going to think you're crazy for following Jesus. No matter what you do, what you say, they're always going to try to find something wrong. But the truth is, it's the best life because the Bible says, the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not, what? Want. You and I both know it's the best life to live, and it's the best life because we should not have want of anything. All right, I want to give you 2 scriptures. Let's go to Luke chapter 14, verses 4 through 6. This will sort of set the stage for our lesson this morning. Oh, you got a book already? Okay, all right, I was just going to make sure. We're at lesson number 5. All right, will somebody read Luke chapter 14, verses 4 through 6? Let's talk about how important the sheep are to the shepherd. Okay, is that Luke 14? Oh, I may have given you the wrong reference there. I'm sorry about that. Okay, well here. Maybe some of you can find it in just a minute. I'll give you just a paraphrase quote then. We'll read it on the screen, and maybe you can help me find the reference, and I'll go back and change it a little bit later. What man of you having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders. Notice, he did not pull it by its collar. He didn't even lead it with his staff. That lost sheep that he found, he picked it up and he put it on his shoulders. It's kind of amazing. When you find a lost sheep, what are some things that are probably wrong with it? Say what now? Yeah, it could be hurt. It could be dehydrated. A lot of different things can happen. So the shepherd, he would just pick the sheep up, put it on his shoulders. It's amazing to me how the Bible sort of sheds light on that. I saw this, and I read a story about this. It was pretty neat to me. Some of you may have seen this on Facebook. I don't know, but anyway, I screenshotted it on my phone just because I liked it so much. But there was a little story below this picture, and it talks about the shepherd, how at the end of the day, he would go and inspect all of the sheep in the flock. And a lot of times, the sheep would get in like briars and things, and they would have cuts on their faces, and the flies, they were just unmerciful. How many of you ever been on a farm? You see the flies flying on the animals' ears, and they're shaking constantly. Well, flies really love sheep, and that they literally have open wounds on their ears, on their faces, because the flies. And the shepherd would go around and put oil on the heads of those that had open wounds and things like that. And what it would do is it would heal the wound, and it would keep the flies away. I thought that was neat. I was like, man, this is really interesting because there's such a close connection between the shepherd and how he has to care for the sheep. And he has to go to each one. In Psalm 23, he said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And he maketh me to lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside the still waters, and he restores my soul. You think about after the sheep have been scared, or maybe a predator has come, and they all back together again with the shepherd. That's the idea. They feel restored. How come the sheep will not drink from running water? Why would that be? Say there's a stream. Now, a horse or a cow will go right in the water. A sheep will not. Why is that? Yeah, they can't swim. If a sheep were to fall over in the water, he wouldn't be able to get back up. The water would immediately soak into his thick wool, and he would have too much weight. It would almost be impossible for him to get out of the water. You see, we call the sheep dumb animals. They're not that dumb. They know better. It's amazing to me how the Bible, when the writer is writing about this, that's what he's thinking of. He leads me beside the still water. Keep going. He leads me in paths of righteousness. Now, the shepherd is always out front, right? He's not driving the sheep from behind most times. You know, you have dogs that do that, don't you? Sheepdogs. Most times the shepherd is out front. He's looking for green pastures. That's what he's talking about. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. It's interesting, the two things that the rod and the staff do. The rod is like a short club, maybe a little about this long, and if a predator comes, the shepherd would be able to throw it. If you have a wolf or something come around. But then you have the staff that's long, has a hook on the end. You ever seen that? Maybe a picture of an old shepherd, old picture of a shepherd and sheep. It does several different things. If a sheep decides he's going to go away from the flock a little bit, he can put that around its neck and put him back in the fold. Sometimes in the Middle East, in Jerusalem and things like that, they're in mountains and they have these crevices in between rocks, and the sheep would get stuck. And they could shove that staff down in there and then turn it and lift the sheep out of the crevice if it's stuck. A lot of different uses for that. So you got one for protection and the other for guidance. Wonder what that writer's thinking about when he's writing about the rod and the staff comforting him in death. Protection and guiding him safely home. It's pretty interesting. You keep reading. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Now notice this. You anoint my head with oil. For a long time, whenever I read this, I always thought that this had something to do with like maybe becoming a king or something like that. You know, because kings and priests in the Old Testament, they would have their heads anointed with oil. But it doesn't fit the context. And when I read this, I thought, you know what? I think I finally figured out what he's talking about. He goes to each one and inspects their wounds. And he heals them. It's pretty special. The church is a lot like the relationship between the flock and the shepherd. All right, let's look at our books. Lesson number 5. You'll see under Roman numeral 2, letter A. The church is called a flock. Now, what I've done is under each letter, you know, A, capital B, I'm going to have a section break there so you'll be able to follow along. There'll be a picture on the screen with that statement on the screen. Okay? All right. Let's go to Acts chapter 20. Acts chapter 20. Now, at the start of this, I'm going to go just a little bit deep, okay? So I want you to sort of stay with me just for a minute. We'll share with you some specific words about the flock. While you're turning there, this sheep, his name is Shrek. He'd been gone from his shepherd for 5 years. Somehow they were reconnected. He found this sheep somewhere, and that's what he looked like. Now, I have an article here that I found about him, and here's what it said. Shrek the sheep, when he was sheared after being gone for 5 years, his fleece weighed over 60 pounds. Average shearing, 10 pounds. That's pretty neat. 5 times the normal weight that he was carrying because he was lost. I thought to myself, there's a very close connection between that and if we go away from the shepherd. Think about the weight that we carry if we go astray. It's a pretty powerful principle. Shrek the sheep finally found his shepherd again. He was no longer lost, but he was reunited. All right, will somebody read Acts chapter 20, verse 17? I'm going to give you some words here before we start. Okay, he had a message for these elders, okay? Notice, there is one church in Ephesus, and there's a group of men as their leaders. Something you're never going to find in the New Testament is a church with one leader or multiple churches with one leader. Sometimes you may hear a guy talking. He said, well, I'm over 5 churches. I'm over all the churches in that county. And I think to myself, wow, where have we gone? That's a far cry from in the New Testament. He said, no, there was one congregation in Ephesus, and they had a group of men. Now, you can see the wisdom in that, can't you? One man can take a whole congregation away. One man could take multiple congregations away. But if these men that are elders, they make decisions as a group, they all agreeing, yes, this is the direction we're going. You see, God is smart. He knows what he's doing. And this is the way that he has designed this. All right, now, I want you to keep in mind this word, elders, okay? Now, we're going to find 3 different words here that describe these men. That's one of them. Let's go down to verse 28. Same chapter, verse 28. Notice this. Here's the message that he told him. All right, he said, sent from Miletus to the elders of the church at Ephesus, and he said to them, here's what he said. Take heed, therefore, unto yourselves and to all the, here it is, the flock. We're going to notice that word in detail in a little while. Over the which the Holy Ghost hath made you, here's our second word, overseers, to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood. Now, I have these words on the screen. One of them we don't use regularly. It's found in 1 Timothy chapter 3 in the qualifications of elders. He said, if any man is blameless as the steward of God. Okay, he's talking about the office of an elder. He calls him a steward. We don't use this word very often. It's only used one time in reference to the eldership. So more, you'll see these 3 in the New Testament. Now, I want to focus on these a little bit. Just sort of open your mind for a minute if you can. I know this is going to be tough. Just try to stay with me, okay? The first word that we noticed, okay, it is this one. The word elder is the word presbyteros in the original language. Then you see the word overseer. It's also translated bishop. 1 Timothy 3, verse 1, if any man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. That's that word. Then you see this third word, which is also a form of the word flock. They're a little bit different, okay, but they come from the same root. So it's interesting. You have the shepherd and the flock are almost the same. They're almost the same word in the original, but they're a little bit different. So here you go. I want to focus on this one, because that word is the word for feed. Who is there in Acts chapter 20, verse 28, and you have something different for the word feed? In fact, I'm going to see what mine says. I'm using the ESV. I'm trying to make the switch to the ESV, and I'm finding out it's a little bit difficult after I've done all my memory work from the King James. But eventually, I will make the full switch, hopefully. Yeah, shepherd the flock of God, which is among you. Okay, it's the same idea. Let's see here. Okay, mine says to care for the church of God. Okay. I appreciate whoever keeps us stocked in batteries back there, because I'd be lost. All right. Now I want to focus on this word just for a minute, because this word is also translated one time in the New Testament in the King James, in Ephesians 4 and verse 11, as the word for pastor. Okay? The reason why this one to me is the most controversial of the three words, because who does the world usually say is the pastor? The preacher. I don't know exactly when that came into being or how, but it's foreign to the New Testament. In fact, the pastor is not the preacher at all. Now, a pastor can be a preacher in the New Testament. Okay, a preacher can be a pastor, like a preacher can serve in the eldership. And an elder can go and preach. But when we use the term pastor, it does not refer to the minister at all. In fact, the pastor has authority over the minister. The local preacher is a member of the congregation, just like anyone else. Okay? The only difference between the local preacher is he can get fired. All right? Members can't get fired. Okay? The preacher can. But at any rate, the idea there is the elders, okay, the ones to whom he is speaking. I'm going to ask the guy in the back to touch the screen there so I can advance this slide. Okay, there we go. The elders are to whom he is speaking. And he said, you are the ones who are the overseers, not the preacher. And then he told them to feed, to pastor the church of God. So that's very crucial. That's very important as far as that is concerned, to understand if the church is a flock, who's responsible for their direction? Now, the preacher's out front a lot, okay? He's the one who's doing the preaching, the teaching, and all that. So I can understand, I guess, where people sort of get this idea, but the truth is, he doesn't have any authority. I do not have any authority. But the elders have all the authority in the local congregation. All right, any question or comment before we go on? Okay. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 5. You move on down to number 2. We're under number 1. Let's go on down to number 2 there. We'll go to 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. One guy, he said one time, I told my wife that she drew on her eyebrows a little too high. She looked surprised. Well, when I saw that, I thought, a lot of people are very surprised by this. This is something that they're shocked. They read about, wait a minute, I thought the pastor was the preacher. You even go overseas, guess what they call their preacher? Same thing. I'm like, wait a minute, how did this go through the whole world, this idea of the pastor being the preacher? So it is a little bit surprising, but at any rate, it's the truth, and it's undeniable. All right, 1 Peter chapter 5. Will somebody read verses 1 through 4? All right. I want you to understand something about elders. Elders are not perfect men, but they're good men. I want you to understand that elders many times catch a lot of flack that they do not deserve. Today, when you think about the office of an elder, try to put yourself in their shoes. They do a lot of things that people don't see. They work on behalf of the church. They don't get paid for it. They do it because they love God. They do it because they love the church. It is totally a sacrificial work. It's not like preaching. You know, I think preaching can be difficult, but I still get paid to preach. You think about the work that elders have to do, and they don't get paid for it. Now, there were some in the New Testament that I believe got paid. I do believe that they were. In the context of elders, he's talking about elders. He said, do not muzzle the ox that treads out the corn. He's talking about an elder. Okay? Reward him, is what he's saying. So, despite that, we have 4 men who do a lot of good for the church, and they don't get paid for it. They do it because they love God. So, I'm asking the congregation to sort of keep that in mind. You know, I think that the members here love our elders, and I think that our elders do a good job for the members. But just remember in the future, you know, if something pops up, maybe you get a little frustrated with somebody, or some little thing happens, you know, you get a personality flaw with somebody, or there's some kind of little thing go on. Well, just remember, you know, be careful how you approach the eldership. You know, they're men too. They're just like us. They're not superhuman Christians. They're leaders. All right, when you look at this passage, what are some responsibilities? And I always say this, I do not envy the work of elders. All right, what are some responsibilities that you see are very important as far as the leadership is concerned? Shepherd the flock. And the shepherds have to be where? In the front or the back? In the front. A lot of times, the preacher is the one who's barking at the heels, you know. But the leaders, you know, they're leading, see, they're shepherding the flock. All right, that's a good one. What else do you see? Be an example. Yes. I think about every day we've got 4 good men who are very good examples. You know, I've seen elderships that are not like that. Sometimes you have 1 or more, maybe all of them sometimes, who are not good examples. And that really hinders a lot. Okay, yeah, good examples. You know, I noticed this, and I think our congregation is, you know, I hate to just relate everything to our congregation, but it says they are not domineering. You know, I'm thankful that we have elders who are mindful of the other elders. You know, I can think even now, if I text the elders in a group message and I ask them about something, they'll go and talk about it amongst themselves, and then they'll get back with me. You know, I like that. I think that's how it's supposed to be. That's smart. Okay. I'm trying to think of some more here. But anyway, I think those are all good. All right, any question or comment before we move on? Okay. I have a note here from Ephesians 4:11 and 12 right under that, talking about how the word pastor is used in reference to elders. And in the ESV, it uses the word shepherds. I think they realized the word is being abused, and they translated it the same way that it's translated here. Shepherd the flock of God, the chief shepherd, the chief pastor. Who's the chief pastor? Well, that's Jesus. All right? He is the chief elder of the church. Okay? That's the idea. He's the one who directs everything. He's the head of the body, the Bible says. And the elders here on earth, the group of men that God has allowed to be over each congregation, they sort of expedite. They don't make laws, they enforce them. And there's a little bit different thing there. All right. Okay, let's go on down. He has, under number 3, Hebrews 13, verses 20 and 21. Okay, let's go there. I'm going to try to speed this up just a little bit. I have about 10 minutes left. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 20 and 21. Will somebody read that when you have a chance? Okay, so he's called the great shepherd of the sheep. And that's sort of the idea of who Jesus is. I like that idea. You know, when you look in the Bible, Jesus is several different things as far as our relationship with him is concerned. He is called our elder brother. It's pretty neat in the book of Hebrews. He's called the great shepherd of the sheep. He's called the Son of Man, the Son of God, the Lamb of God. You know, he's called a lot of different things. So there are a lot of different applications as far as that's concerned. The teacher came to Johnny and she asked Johnny, she said, Johnny, if you had 5 sheep and one of them were lost, how many sheep would you have? He said, 5. She knew this was going to be tough. She said, Johnny, let's back up, start over, think about this closely. She said, you have 5 sheep. Okay, she did her hand. You have one of them or one of them are gone. How many sheep do you have left? He looked at it, he said, 5. She said, Johnny, you don't know your math. You're going to have to learn this. He said, ma'am, with all due respect, you don't know your sheep. Because if one go, they all go. You know, sometimes that can be the case. But there are times one of them can get lost. Okay? Maybe the sheep are not paying attention. One of them decides to go astray a little bit. He's 10 feet away. Then he's 20 feet away. Next thing you know, he's out of sight. Jesus is the great shepherd of the flock. We want to stay where he is. Yes. Yeah. I sort of agree as far as, you know, if it's gotten that serious, yeah, I mean, I would mention it to the elders and see if sometimes elders can open doors. True, yeah, that's true too. Yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah, that is true. Sure enough. It's hard to say what to do. You know, I don't know either. I think it's one of those things, there's a lot involved there. Yeah. Well, one thing that I would mention is if they don't go here, they need to go somewhere. You know, maybe so-and-so has hurt me, you know, and it may be time for me to move on from that relationship, and I can still love them or whatever, but I can love them from a distance. You know, I can find somewhere else where I can be comfortable in worship and something like that. I mean, that's something I would suggest. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, there are times in my life when I have felt, you know, I didn't want to go to church either. You know, just because of something that may seem small, but when you're involved in it, it's not small. So I can understand what you're talking about a little bit. And I think everybody here could probably relate to a time in their lives when something similar to that. But I wish I had a definite answer. I really don't. And every situation is probably different. But I will say a lot of responsibility is on the person who is hurt. You know, it sounds mean to say that. It's like, you know, well, man, you know, you're not being considerate. No, I'm being considerate. But think about the ark. You think Noah had a skunk on the ark? Yeah. Think about all the nasty animals that he had. He had to take care of them nasty things. He had to clean up after them and all. But the truth is, if he left that ark, he would die. He'd be just like the other people that were outside the ark. He'd be gone. So we kind of come to a crossroads, you know. We think, all right, am I going to abandon the church, my own soul salvation, because somebody said something mean? Or am I going to stick it out? Sure enough. Yeah. You're definitely right. You're not going to get them to come back. In fact, I don't know if that's the situation, what you're talking about, but I can think of one right now that they were looking for a reason to leave, and they used me to get out of it, and they will never come back. I mean, I think, man, you know, I even was surprised at the way this fellow was acting. I mean, you know, it was pretty crazy. But anyway, sometimes that happens, and I don't know how to fix it, really. That's right. Yeah. That's good. I like that. That's a really good point. You know, we're all people. We're all humans. We're going to have times in our lives where we're doing real well, and we're going to have times in our lives when we're not doing well. And the truth is, if you catch me on a bad day, you may not want to say something that's not nice to me, you know, because oftentimes I will let some things come out of my mouth that probably shouldn't have been said to you. So, you know, it's just the truth of the matter. We are all humans. We make mistakes, and sometimes we have some pretty nice things to say when things are going good, and, you know, when things are not so good, hey, we might be having an off day. So that would be something I would take in consideration too, you know. I have tried my best to do this. I'm not always successful. If somebody's really, really upset one day, that may be their bad day. The next week, they may be feeling a little bit better, and they may come back with a different attitude, you know. So I've tried that. I'm not always successful, but anyway, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. All right, let's go to one more then, and then I'll quit for this morning. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 25. Okay, we'll save it. Thank you.